All right, everybody, happy Monday night to you, and welcome to Messiah, to the cutting room floor. This is where we share with you some of the things that we had worked on, some of the studying that we did, things that we thought were going to make the message, but in the end, they just didn't make the final cut. But we're still proud to share them with you. And one of the things for the series, Punch Fear in the Face, Pastor Chuck and I had an idea, and it was probably a terrible idea. It's an idea we ultimately didn't do. We had planned a video where we're going to dress up in wrestling outfits in luchador masks. And I don't know why we had this idea, but we decided ultimately probably wasn't the right time and place. And then it came time to film a school chapel, and we did. We filmed it for the kids, and we wore these terrible masks, and we were punching fear in the face, and it was absolutely terrible, and my kids will not let me live it down. So that's one of the things that hit the cutting room floor, and I'm so glad that it did, at least for Sunday. But if you have a kid at Messiah School and you want to go back and you want to watch that chapel talk that we did last week, you can do so, and feel free to embarrass me. Pastor Chuck, Pastor Jim, and Ryan Fendler, the brave pastors and youth minister who would do such a silly thing. Now, another reading that I would have loved to have focused on, and we did get one verse from it, but if you're looking at Jesus healing this family, both the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years and the girl who had just died, who was 12 years old. One of the other readings that would have been fantastic was 1 John chapter 4. In fact, I spent my first few weeks of studying passages really focusing on 1 John and thinking that 1 John 4 is the place where I would go. Now, I love the epistles of John, because the epistles of John are like love letters. They're like love letters from the last disciple to you and me. The last disciple, Peter and James and Thomas and all the other guys have already died. And maybe John was the youngest, or maybe God just blessed him with long life. We know that the others were incredibly persecuted, and they underwent martyrdom. But John lived a long life. And so the last of the disciples, the guys that walked with Jesus, the last one, John, he kind of finishes up his life with these love letters, these love epistles to the church. 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John. And in 1 John chapter 4, this is what he says. He says, "This is how love is made complete in us." And I love that phrase, because what John is saying is we know God is love, and we know Jesus was love. And if you ever wonder if God is love or what God is like, John would say, man, just look at my friend Jesus. Look at what he did, who he stood up for. Look at the miracles he did. There was nothing wrong in him. Everything was good. He was perfect love. And so John is challenging us. He's saying, let's have that kind of love. Let's let it be made complete in us. And the Greek word here for complete is also the Greek word for finished. In fact, it's the exact word that Jesus uses on the cross. His last word, "it is finished," is that word complete. So like Jesus could have said, "it is completed." Like, I have done it. I have broken sin once and for all. I have died for the sins of the world. I have broken death once and for all. It is finished. It is completed. And what John wants is he wants that kind of love to be made complete in us. And then he says in verse 18, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear," which we did focus on yesterday on Sunday, because fear has to do with punishment. Has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. So if your love is having a problem becoming perfect, fear is finding a way of sneaking in there. This is like living in this world versus living in God's heaven. Like, what are we living for? Are we living against the fears of this world or with the fears of this world? Or are we living focused on God's kingdom? And then verse 19, we love because he first loved us. Love is rooted in the gospel. Love is rooted in what Christ has done for us. And then verse 20, whoever claims to love God, yet hates a brother or sister, is a liar. That's why I don't like Christians attacking people on social media. I just don't see how that is loving God. I don't see how that is showing love of God or love of neighbor. I don't know how that can go well. Who do people say that you are on social media? I think it's a good question that we need to wrestle with a little bit. Here's some rules before you post. If we want verse 20 to come true, that we want to claim to love God, we can't hate our brothers and sisters out there in the world. So if we want to love God, here's some rules before you post. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? And then the last verse, verse 21, God has given us this command. Anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. By the way, Christians, this is the only testimony you're required to give. The only testimony you're required to give is your love for your brothers and sisters out there in the world. You don't have to have fancy apologetics. You don't have to explain everything away. If we just demonstrate God's love through us to our neighbor, that will be testimony enough. Did you show him God's love? Do that. Let that be your sermon. Let that be your message to the world. Let that be your testimony. All right, God bless you. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for tuning in on Monday night.